There are few places in Wisconsin that could claim as many discoveries as the Yerkes Observatory near Lake Geneva. The observatory is more than a century old and houses the world's largest refracting telescope. It's been visited by the likes of Carl Sagan and Albert Einstein. But it's more than just a place to study the stars. There's art, architecture, and sprawling gardens to enjoy there as well. To share more about what you can do on a visit there, Lake Effect's Becky Mortensen is joined by Walt Chaddick from the observatory and Amanda Weibel from Travel Wisconsin.
Let's start with the history of the observatory. It opened in 1897. What can you tell me about the origins of the observatory?
This was the brainchild of the astronomer George Hale. He got all this money from the guy who had built the L train in Chicago, which is crazy. Charles Yerkes got wealthy in those early days of public transportation in Chicago, and they needed to get away from the smoke of the factories. They needed to get away from the Industrial Revolution of Chicago. And back then, Wisconsin to Chicagoans was like Alaska. And so they were chasing clear skies. They knew city lights were on the way, and they needed to get up on this little ridge overlooking Geneva Lake. And they built this architectural masterpiece that would become the world's first graduate PhD program for this new field of study, astrophysics.
So we can't talk about the observatory without talking about the Great Refractor. So what can you tell us about this telescope?
It is a goosebump-inducing tube of joy that when people enter this giant dome that has remained this mysterious edifice for 130 years, they're overcome with childlike exuberance. I've seen it happen, y'all, over and over and over, and it happens to our staff every time you open these really loud vault doors. You're looking at what has remained the largest refracting telescope in the world. And what that is a lens telescope, as opposed to the newer style, which use mirrors, the reflecting telescopes. These lens telescopes are things of beauty. And the Great Refractor, right here in southern Wisconsin, is a 40-inch diameter couplet of lenses with a 63.5 to 65-foot long tube in this stunning dome. And it is working and used, and we use it for public observation and private research, and it is a sight to behold.
Yeah, you talked about the big dome, this big room, the floor moves. It's like this whole operation in there. So let's talk about some of the discoveries made because of the Great Refractor. What are some notable things that have been achieved at the Yerkes Observatory?
We can go through some neat ones. Like, you're talking about a who's who of noteworthy astronomers have passed through these halls. Edwin Hubble was there in the World War I era, so the 19 teens, and he wrote his doctoral dissertation called Photographic Investigations of Faint Nebulae. And in this is the early stages of him figuring out that the Milky Way was not the only galaxy. Y'all, we, until 101 years ago, thought that the Milky Way was it. Since then, we figured out there are probably at least 2 trillion galaxies. So when my grandparents were alive, they thought there was one galaxy. And because of the work of Edwin Hubble and others at Yerkes and later in California chasing clear skies, we figured out Andromeda was galaxy number 2, and we would go on to understand that there are 2 trillion. I would say the number one discovery at Yerkes, William Morgan in 1951 at Yerkes Observatory figured out the shape of our galaxy, the Milky Way. That shape, that spiral arm shape, was discovered in Wisconsin by William Morgan in 1951. Carl Sagan studied there. I would say Carl Sagan did something for astronomy that no one else had done before. He made it cool. like he was the hipster astronomer. He had blazers with elbow patches and he wore turtlenecks year round and had that swoop skater haircut before Tony Hawk made that cool. And he did something incredible. He put astronomy on television. And the show Cosmos, watched by over 500 million people on public broadcasting, is the most watched show in PBS history. So when you think about Edwin Hubble, Carl Sagan, William Morgan, and then Gerard Kuiper figuring out everything on the other side of Neptune at Yerkes Observatory.
So let's talk about what people can see there today. There are a variety of tours that people can take at the observatory. Can you talk about what that experience is like?
We have tried to reimagine what a tour is, um, and tried to make it hilarious. That's one point. We've tried to be science communicators who are talking about architecture, because it's certainly an architectural masterpiece. We're talking about landscape design because we're an Olmsted site. We're talking about the history of photography, because at the same time photography was burgeoning, the telescopes were able to put cameras on them. And so the pictures of space beyond the moon that were taken for the very first time were taken at Yerkes Observatory. And so we have 180,000 glass plate pictures of space. So we show visitors those. We also are this really cool art center now, and we're collaborating with artists and making art ourselves that is inspired by astronomy. So there are pieces hanging in these neat corridors by Eric Carroll, the digital artist from Asheville, North Carolina. There's sculpture in the yard based on Einstein's field notes by Ashley Zelinsky, who was the official sculptor for the James Webb Space Telescope. So we're really obsessed with unexpected outcomes. What we are doing is a little performance, a little entertainment, a little education, some fantastic customer service, and just trying to have people leave going, that's not what I expected. And oh my God, that was so sweet.
Do visitors have an opportunity to look through the Great Refractor?
For sure. We don't do that in the daytime for obvious reasons, but typically every Friday and Saturday night from March to about Thanksgiving, we have public observing nights. There are only 12 tickets available for those each of those nights. If it's clear, we're looking at as many objects as we can through the Great Refractor. So that's a really neat program that has been up and running for a couple of years now.
So you did mention the architecture. The observatory was built to be a place to study things that are far away, but the building itself is worth seeing. Can you talk a little bit about the architecture of the building?
You bet. Henry Ives Cobb, C-O-B-B, is our architect. He had built the University of Chicago's main campus down in Chicago. He built the Newberry Library, which is a remarkable bibliographical edifice, but he was just set free up on this 50-acre plot of land in Wisconsin. And this kind of Romanesque Beaux-Art hodgepodge of styles to match George Hale's astronomically based brain is a masterpiece in the Roman cross shape. It has three domes. It has this terrazzo marble floor and these marble walls that are just so soothing and calming. It has the Hagenal Rotunda that you enter, and he's using all these tricks of the eye in architecture that's called a trompe l'oeil. He's making you come in and look up at these skylights and these owls flying in their decorative columns, and it's just riddled with this ornamental sort of majesty that we'll see people outside, like even when we're closed, they're just looking at these columns and all of this Roman brick and terracotta for hours. And photography nuts, they love it. But just anybody who is into things that last, things that were made well, things that were cared for, is just totally digging on this Henry Ives Cobb architecture.
And beyond the building, the grounds are also quite beautiful. So can you describe what a stroll through the area around the observatory looks like?
Yeah, for sure. We've put roughly $20 million into the restoration of the building, but also the grounds. Now, we're a not for profit who is raising money from regular people, and we've just, by the skin of our teeth, we are just fighting tooth and nail to keep this alive. But it's more than just the observatory, as you say. It is a 50-acre plot of land. It was designed about 8 years after the observatory opened. Now they've got all the land ready to be landscaped, and the Olmsted brothers come in. Their dad was famous. He's Frederick Law Olmsted. Their firm had built Central Park in New York City. They built the U.S. Capitol grounds in D.C. and parks in Milwaukee, obviously, in Chicago, and university campuses across the country. And they designed Yerkes 50 acres. It was his oldest son, John Charles Olmsted, as the chief landscape designer. And since then, it sort of fell into disrepair, and our landscape committee and our staff have blazed about 4 miles of trails, woodland trails, prairie trails, white pine forest trails, oak savanna trails. We've got 5 beehives in our apiary that's making honey. We have rain runoff systems into these native species ravines. We've worked with Jens Jensen Ecology out of Madison to do a pollinator prairie. And Roy Diblick out of Burlington, the North Winds Perennial Farm, to do all of these welcome gardens and sort of making this old prairie come back to life the way it would have been centuries ago. So that's all free, and you can just walk the trails before or after the tour, and there's site maps, and there's just a lot of interesting little things to see, not to mention that the observatory was built before cars, and so all of the professors who were famous astronomers lived in all the houses on the campus. So we have 2 restored homes where our visiting poets and scientists and musicians stay. But all these little houses are just full of year after year, these brilliant scientists turning over and living in these homes. So it's quite a sight, y'all. It is not just a dorky science institute. There is a lot of stimuli happening.
And you mentioned some art there at the observatory. What can you tell me about that?
When we took this over 5 years ago as a nonprofit foundation, we made a determination that the University of Chicago, which is somewhere in the range of the 15th wealthiest school in the world, they couldn't make this work as an observatory alone. And so we weren't going to accomplish that either. We only had a few staff members. We still only have about 12, 14 staff members. And so we decided to work with all of these artists who were inspired by astronomy. We started with Eighth Blackbird. They are a 4-time Grammy-winning ensemble who invited 20 plus musicians, working adult genius musicians from around the world. We closed for 2 weeks. They lived in Williams Bay, Wisconsin on our campus and in private homes. And they just basically wrote a symphony together. And they used old astronomy equipment. They used old astronomy texts. They had visiting faculty. And then they performed these sick pieces underneath the Great Refractor Telescope. To date, we've had, I think, 11 concerts under the Great Refractor. We've had Arapo, based out of Oslo, Norway, came in May and did these rad concerts on a Thursday and Friday night under the dome. We just finished doing the Blackbird Creative Lab for the 3rd year in a row. We also built the world's tallest glass tree 3 years in a row. And people are like, what are they doing with our precious observatory? But we're connecting the history of glass, the Great Refractor, the glass lenses, the 180,000 glass plate pictures of space, connecting that with these glass artists, Jason Mack, Rob Elliott, and their team, and highlighting them as the scientists that they are. Now, they may not have PhDs in a science, But glass artists are certainly scientists, and they collect 6,000 recycled bottles. They built a 37-foot tall spinning frame. They built a furnace that you melt the bottles at 2,200 degrees in, and then you put a pole in, and this liquid glass gets spun on this frame. The community comes out. We have a big festival with beer and food trucks and vendors making crafts. And the community is able to take the pole with the melting glass and spin it on this frame. And over the course of about 8 days, this 37-foot tall, gleaming glass tree is built by the community and these glass artists. And I think it is the coolest festival in the state.
We've got a lot of festivals here, so that's saying something for sure.
Totally.
Now, Lake Geneva is a very popular destination for summer travel. So, Amanda, I'm going to turn to you. What are some other things that people could check out on a visit there this summer?
Well, as the name implies, you're certainly going to want to experience the lake. And while the city is named Lake Geneva, the lake is actually called Geneva Lake. And one of the best ways to see it is the Geneva Lakeshore Path. This is a walking path that hugs the shoreline of the lake and takes you through the backyards of all the grand mansions that sit on the water. It runs for over 20 miles, and each property owner puts their own spin on it. So some of the sections of the path are grass or dirt, and others are concrete and brick, but it's just a stunning walking path. For even more history, plan a tour of Black Point Estate and Gardens. This is a Victorian-era mansion that really serves as a window into the past as well. A Chicago beer baron constructed the home in 1888 as a summer retreat. And today you can come and enjoy its splendidly preserved grandeur. There were no roads when Black Point was built, so you're going to have to arrive in style by boat. You can book a guided tour of Black Point through Lake Geneva Cruise Line. And that's just one of many of their really great tour options. They also have some fun special events that are perfect for astronomy fans. On August 6th and 10th, Lake Geneva Cruise Line is going to host nighttime excursions for a chance to see the Perseid meteor shower. So that's a really fun way to go and experience the celestial event, showering the sky and shooting stars by boat.
And because Lake Geneva is such a popular place to visit, there are a lot of options for places to stay. So what are some you'd recommend?
Check out the Abbey Resort. This is a full-service resort experience. It has a classic A-frame style design and has been welcoming guests for 62 years. You're going to stay in newly renovated guest rooms with all the comforts and conveniences for the modern traveler. They also have a ton of great amenities for the family, like on-site dining. They have an indoor pool. They also have a movie theater and a wonderful spa. You can also book a room at the French Country Inn on the lake for more historic wonder. This 33-room resort has a really unique connection to the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. So portions of the main building, including this beautifully hand-carved staircase, were built in Denmark in the 1880s, then transported to Chicago for the World's Fair before finally being moved to the Lake Geneva region. You're going to be totally awed by their spacious rooms, the cathedral ceilings, the lakeview balconies, and all the touches of history that are intertwined by modern comfort. And one final recommendation for couples is the Belfry House in Delavan. This is an adults-only boutique hotel, and they really focus on elegance and service. So also make sure you reserve a table at Opus, which is the attached fine dining restaurant. You're going to be wowed by the French and Asian-inspired cuisine.
Many Wisconsinites may have visited Lake Geneva, but what's something new or surprising that people may not have done before?
I think a lot of people are surprised to learn that Lake Geneva is actually where Dungeons and Dragons was born. So Gary Gygax grew up in Lake Geneva and co-created the game in 1974 that went on to rule the fantasy realm of all tabletop games. And visitors can learn about this slice of Lake Geneva fame at the Geneva Lake Museum. The museum has a new permanent exhibit that's called The Wizard of Lake Geneva that explores Gygax's life and legacy. You can also return in the fall, where you can experience the third annual Dragon Days Fantasy Festival. It's a fun-filled fantasy festival for families, any fantasy fan or gamer alike. And there are lots of different activities, performance, and vendors on hand, and that happens October 4th and 5th.
So the Yerkes Observatory is a historic and beautiful place, but maybe there are some people who are just not that interested in astronomy. For both of you, why would you encourage them to pay a visit to the observatory?
This is a dynamic that I witness on a daily basis that people after our tour say almost exactly what you just said. I wasn't interested at all in astronomy, and this was awesome. Because we're not giving a tour of the universe. We're not traveling to Neptune and talking about, the radial velocity of some star 20,000 light years away. This is about human achievement. This is about people. This is about an architect and masons and electricians who built a masterpiece. It's about landscape designers who got their hands dirty with their crews building an arboretum. This is about photography and the people who push the button to take the pictures. And it's about the context of humans within the study of astronomy. And so we see that every day, that people are just stunned, like, I didn't care at all about this, and my wife dragged me here, or my boyfriend, or what, my cousin. I can't believe I never knew about this before. And so that feeling that we have makes us as excited about that kind of visitor as we get when there's an astronomy nerd. Like, it's very fulfilling to show this to the world.
Travel Wisconsin includes Yerkes Observatory as one of our wonders of Wisconsin. And that is our list of places that leave people saying, wow, I did not know that was in Wisconsin. And you can tell from this conversation why Yerkes has that distinction. I mean, it's all about where that history, science, and art collides in such a fun and unexpected way. I mean, you can stand in the halls where Albert Einstein once stood. You are learning about the people making these science-changing discoveries. You can see all of the craft and precision that went into designing the building and the grounds. And Yerkes Observatory just does such a wonderful job at making that experience approachable and fun and so memorable. So everyone who visits is going to have one of those wow moments.
Well, Walt and Amanda, thank you so much for joining me for Wandering Wisconsin.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Amanda Weibel is the Communications Officer for Travel Wisconsin. Walt Chaddick is the Director of Programs and External Affairs at Yerkes Observatory. They both joined Lake Effect's Becky Mortensen for our series, Wandering Wisconsin. You can find more conversations about things to do and see around our home state at WUWM.com.